Hello. Today we'll show you how to publish statistics, all sorts of stats of your players to World Wide Web. So players can compare how they are doing, or maybe people from the outside, maybe their families or friends are interested in how many battles they opened or how many hours they spend playing on our server. So without further ado, let's have a look what we have so far. And this is the website we've built. So for now, of course, it's wrapped in a pretty bootstrap right now, and a beautiful screenshot by either Zoro or OneShot. And here we have a list of players with player's head and rendered 3D model of their figure with the name and time spent on the server. They are all sorted by how much time they've spent, so anybody who joined the server randomly will probably wind up at the very bottom. And we have most active players kind of rewarded by floating to the top. And of course we can change this, we can sort these stats by anything else, not time played, by, for example, how many times they opened a battle or rang a bell, and I'll show this to you in a moment. Okay, so where do we start? Let's start at the beginning with prerequisites, what we actually need to have and need to know in order to successfully set this up. So first and foremost, you need a Minecraft server. I'm running Spigot, but I'm quite sure you can pull the same data from any sort of vanilla server. I'm running 1.19, but I'm confident the concept of collecting player stats was popular through other versions. Second thing is database. I'm running Mysql Database, which is most popular vanilla, straight out of the box, working without any tweaks database that comes with a web server usually. So if you have a LAMP stack, which stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL and PHP, then you have MySQL available by default. Now, I'm not going to explain how to install MySQL or how to install web server. If you don't know that, there are plenty of tutorials out there that can help you with this. I could recommend DigitalOcean as a good provider of such services. They are very much aimed towards developers and quick deployment of such solutions. So just with few clicks you can basically have your own LAMP stack server deployed, and it's for $5 or so every month. Alright, so once you have a database server, you need Python. Python is a programming language that you have to install separately, although with few Linux distributions it actually comes bundled. I'm not quite sure, don't quote me on this, which ones do, which ones don't. Anyway, you need to pull data from Minecraft server to web server, right? You need to make them communicate. And if your web server can actually read stuff from Minecraft server's directories, folders, then you have some sort of security problem. And that's where Python comes in to facilitate that communication. Alright. And Python script that will be running there needs to be triggered by something. There won't be any user pressing enter every once in a while, so it's triggered. So I'll be using, as any Linux integration has it, I'll be using crontab. There are multiple ways of triggering things in specific time intervals or dependent on various events, but crontab is my favorite for Linux. So that L in LAMP stack stands for Linux, right? I will not outline how crontab works. I will just signalize that this is my preferred method. What happens next is crontab calls the Python script. Python script reads data from the Minecraft server. It writes to a folder that web server can see, and that's pretty much it. The web server I'm using, and the one that's most popular, is Apache. It doesn't really matter which one, as long as it can serve pages, really. But you will find it in standard packages. Alright, let's try to graph it. Let's say first we have some sort of client, some sort of user that opens a web page. Really, that's not the best way to try to graph it. We should start with Minecraft server, but let's think of user experience. So first they can open a website. There's your PHP script running there that will try to gather data from all sorts of places to display them to the user. So first it runs to the database. It runs to the Mysql database. Alright, Mysql database will have two things. It will have the user ID, unique user ID, and how long the player has played on the server. This is what we need for this particular integration. It can contain plenty of stuff, anything that you want to put there, but these two are important in our case. I'm not quite sure whether this is playtime or time played, but we'll check it later. So second is we're running to an external service that gives us the face of the player, and we need to use our universal user ID, unique user ID. Sorry, yes, we're running to a separate service. I don't quite remember what they're called. We'll look it up in the code in a moment. Let's just try it in here, external avatar service. There you go. We don't really need to worry what happens there, as long as they return what they're supposed to. They send us back the images of the player, and the PHP script puts it all together in a nice table that has the face of the player, name, time played, and the 3D representation of the player. And that's pretty much it. It returns to the end user. Now the trick is, how does the Mysql database get all the stuff that it needs, particularly user ID and playtime? Well, it pulls from a stats file. But before we get to the stats file, cron has to trigger our script. So there's cron. Every day or every month or every 15 minutes it triggers our Python script. I don't quite remember what I called it. It's player pool or something like that. We'll check it in a moment. This player pool script goes to the Minecraft database. Well, not Minecraft database, it goes to stats file. So every world has a stats folder that tells you how many times player opened the battle and stuff like that in this world. And every player has their unique file, right? And in this, the name of the stats file is actually a unique user ID, which will be super helpful, and it contains plenty of data inside the file. So we'll need to grab the name of the file and the contents of the file. Alright, so the Python script, yes, player pool, whatever, pulls it and puts it in the database. And here's the folder with all my stats files. You can see that's my server, right? This is the name of the world. And inside this folder, there will be, other folders with this name, right? There will be this root, and there will be _nether, _the end, and so on. And that is in the main world, overworld folder. Each player, and you can see this unique user ID with .json, and we'll need to grab that and remove the extension of the file. And here we have the actual player stats file. You can see there's plenty of data there. There's a playtime, that's what interests us. That's in ticks, how many ticks player has played on the server. There you go. But we also have all sorts of data that we can use later on. If we want to make a competition, how many animals has the players bred, or how many times they use the crafting table or whatnot, right? There's plenty of bizarre data, like how many, the distance walked and distance sailed in a boat, and so on and so forth. Let's have a look at a Python script that will be in charge of taking apart this file and pulling that out of it. So first we're importing some libraries that will be necessary for us to interact with files, with MySQL databases, and we install them with something called pip. Alright, if you're new to Python, pip is super useful to install, uninstall, update any sort of external libraries. First, I will highlight the path that I'm defining it ahead of the game. This will be a bit of a constant. You can see in the line number 5 over here. That's where all my stuff, all my stats are. That's where I will be pulling the files, right? You can see this path over here as well. Okay, I won't go too much into what's scanned there, for example. I'm just pulling files and directories from that path, and it returns an object with plenty of data in it. I'll talk about it in a moment. I'm defining user ID, a unique user ID in the beginning. It's not really necessary, I could define it later, but just in case. For some reason it felt right. Next part is I'm connecting to the database. So there's plenty of stuff here that's defined, right? Host is always local host. If you're connecting to a database from a different computer that's outside, either you're running an enterprise solution or yourself into trouble. So this will always be localhost. User, well, I defined the user when I was setting up the table, setting up the database, and the password is, this is my super secret password you will never guess, and I guess I just read it. Anyway, these 4 elements always appear in database. So my DB is the name of the interface I'll be using to connect with the database, to speak with my database. You can see that cursor is some sort of method in this database connection. I don't really know how it works. I'm just happy to use it, right? We don't need to look into all the cogs that are inside. For each of the directories, and you probably can see where directories come from. Yep, over here we just declared them, scanned the path for any content in it. So for each of the entries that were detected there, we're checking if they are files. We probably could get away without this line, but you know what, just to be on the safe side, just in case somebody thinks it's funny to put a directory in it. We pull user ID from... Alright, you know what, it's a bit complicated. This returns an array, and the 0 element of the array is user ID. I don't think I'll discuss it in detail here. This entry here has a property called name, alright? And it can have many properties like size, who created it, last modified, whatnot. I'm not sure. The one that interests us is name. And I am removing a the extension here in this line, right? So we get pure user ID without JSON extension using this split text method available in os.path. See this OS variable, that library that we imported in the beginning. Alright, now don't look at the print commands. I should probably comment it out. I was just having them there for debug purposes. Best to cross them out. Okay, let's look at the file we're opening. We have to open the stats file, right? So we take the path, we add the file name, and I was thinking it would parse it nicely. That's why I called it file parsed. Unfortunately, it didn't do much. I had to pull it. It was still looking like it looked before. Anyway, this is our file parsed, and I'm pulling an object called stats, then Minecraft::custom, then Minecraft::playtime, right? So it's an object with an object with an object, or array with an array with an array. Alright, let's have a look at the file, what it looks like, alright? You can see here stats, here's Minecraft custom, and whatever goes into Minecraft custom is, see, look at the curly braces, alright? They will tell you what is encompassed in what in JSON. Alright, so instead of Minecraft playtime, we could place anything there, anything that's within that those curly braces. Alright, let's have a look at the MySQL query. You will notice few lines query equals in the beginning. This is where we define what will pull from the database. Here the first one, we're selecting stuff. We're checking if user ID, oh yeah, by the way, the table is called players. If you see players, that's the name of my table. In your case it can be something else, alright? We're checking if there are players with this user ID. This is my table. You see unique user IDs, names, and playtime, right? So we need to be ready for three things. First, check. Second, create a new one. Third, update. We're checking. Oh yeah, let's remove those prints, by the way. Just don't even look at them. First, we're checking if the players are present in the table. If they are present, there's no point in we're counting how many players with this user ID, right? That's where we define user ID, and it goes this way, right? So we're counting how many instances of this UUID appears in the table. If there are some, then we're just updating. If there aren't any, which means equals 0, we will be creating a new entry. Alright, don't mind what happened over there. Look at this line with this if, where the player count, that's an array, so I had to specify 0 element here, equals 0, right? Actually not an array, a tuple, I think. So if it's 0, then we're inserting into database. And if it's not 0, then we're updating. That's all there is to it. You can probably recognize the user ID where it appears in the string, in the query string players table there, right? What else? We're updating these columns with this variable, the user ID that we already used, and we have to change the playtime to string because Python will throw an error otherwise. We're casting it into a string, right? That's what it's called. Right, make sure at the end of the whole thing to execute the query, right? Here execute, that's easy because we did it with insert. But here when we're changing something, you need to commit mydb.commit, alright? Otherwise you may spend 30 minutes looking for a bug where there is none. Alright, let's have a look at the PHP file which renders the actual page with our data. Here we have database connection, and you'll see this standard block of code on plenty of other integrations that, well, basically connect databases, right? And you can see these variables, these what are they called? Constants, there you go. Populated in the first line in the MySQLi connect. So that's the block of code that we use for connecting the database. And next is the line right underneath is select star from players ordered by playtime descending. That one. You may guess it's where we pull data from the database table that we spoke about a moment ago. It basically just, well, pulls the data, pulls everything. That's why star. And as you may think, ordered by playtime descending means that we're ordering by playtime descending. There you go. That's the bit that interests us here. Of course, we can order by. We don't have to order at all. It would be in order of appearance, or actually, no, that would be alphabetical. Anyway, so if the result, if it works, let's just remove this first line here because this is aesthetics. This is the header row for the table. We don't want it at all. Next, we have rows, right? So the database feeds us rows. This result here basically is a list of rows, array of rows. Even if it's just one row, it's still an array. So while row exists, do something with that row, right? So it's fetching row from that result, and it checks, okay, if it's still there, then do something. If it's not, then it just kicks you out of the loop. Next, checking if the string length of the first thing in row, because it's an array inside array, is bigger than 0. What does it mean? I'm just checking if the user ID is present in that row. I don't have to do this. See that 0 is our first column, right? The 0 column, which is unique user ID. So if it's less than or equal 0, it also doesn't process it. Next thing it does, it just gets playtime hours, right? It makes a local variable out of the second column. Yeah, the next line, playtime hours. Going back to row, we have 3 columns, right? We have 0, 1, and 2. And by specifying this number in those square brackets, I'm specifying which column I'm looking for. That's how arrays work. But it's a different lesson. Alright, so playtime. You may notice that I'm dividing it by 20 and by 60. First I'm casting into integer because it's a string by default. I'm dividing by 20 and dividing by 60. By 20 because it's a tick and we have 20 ticks per second. By 60 because we have 60 seconds per minute. And then in a moment I will feed it into the function that's up here, convert to hours, minutes. Oh yeah, and some functions are present in the header. See, require, MC API, that thing. I'll talk about it in a moment. Actually, I'll just paste the link in the description. So don't worry about that stuff, that's just aesthetics. Yeah, what interests you is this. So I'm pulling the image from craftatar.com. Alright, basically it pulls your Minecraft avatar if you feed it user ID, and that's what we're doing. See that $row0? That's what it does. Yep, this one. And we're doing it again to pull the actual entire body of the player. Yep. The row0 is the unique user ID. Alright. What else is happening here? Second, so this is the first and the fourth column of our table, of the table on the website, if you remember what the website looked like. User ID to username. This is a Minecraft function. You can see this function doesn't exist in my file here. It pulls from this mc-api.php. A link in the description. Quite a few very useful Minecraft functions. And convert to hours minutes, that's the one that we do have in this file. Alright. So I'm feeding playtime hours and I'm getting back a nicely formatted time the player spent in the server. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Alright, so this is it for today. I hope this was useful. Let me know if you need any help with these. I may be able to help. Bye!